Добрий день, everybody. My name is Hideout, and in today's video, I would like to share this internal monologue that has been circling in my head for quite a while now. So, as the title suggests, I really hate Brendan Herrera, but I actually have reasons for that. So, we'll start right now. First of all, he is a Trump supporter. And, well, I am a Ukrainian, and there isn't a single Ukrainian person in my country that would say, Trump is a nice guy. He is a good president. Because when Trump was elected again in 2025, he pretty much halted all of the aid that was directed towards Ukraine and its military efforts, which were supplied under the administration of Joe Biden. I remember how in one of his videos, Brandon Herrera, just like Donald Trump, humiliated Biden by saying that he's very feeble and fragile and he can barely talk because he's so old.
The State of the Union address just happened. And in that address, the barely coherent Joe Biden said that, again, he's calling to ban assault weapons and, those dangerous 100-round clips are same different diaper.
You can say the same about Donald Trump. He is a man with a messiah complex, truly obsessed with power, really thinks that he can do it all by himself, that he can change the fates of millions of people, while there were instances of him actually falling asleep at a press conference.
The task force is already working to expand vaccine options, examine the timing and sequencing of childhood vaccines, strengthen safety monitoring, advance research into alternative adjuvants, and
Operation Epic Fury is not an endless war. It's a decisive campaign with clear objectives.
on deregulation. HHS proudly is now leading the pack.
Or literally soiling himself in front of a large audience.
Fantastic job. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, please. Thank you.
Mr. President, can you respond to the new Fox poll that says people think ICE is a
Obviously, my biggest grudge is the fact that Trump doesn't give nearly as much aid to Ukraine as the previous president did. Trump also has a photograph of Putin and himself hung on the walls of the White House. The photo was taken during the Alaska summit on the 15th of August in 2025. These are the representatives of the two countries which promised us safety if we gave up on our nuclear arsenal, which we did in 1994, but as you can see, the promises were never kept. Trump also didn't seem to be at least slightly bothered by the fact that Russia signed a military cooperation agreement with Taliban, which is the terrorist organization against which the US government fought for around 20 years. The agreement, on the other hand, would presuppose Taliban no longer being viewed as a terrorist organization by Russia. Personally, the last straw was when Trump decided to lift the sanctions for oil export in Russia, and it obviously gave them a military advantage. Not only did he provide very little help, he also caused actual harm. Regarding the Patriot systems, this is kind of funny that Trump just likes making promises, and at the very last moment, when everything is at stake, he just lets us down. And he has done that multiple times. And the refusal of shipping Patriot missiles to Ukraine because of the ongoing Iran war is one of the examples. Well, I assume that we, as a country who is defending against an invader who has military capabilities way above ours, we need those Patriot missiles more than US needs now, because the war in Iran is a war of choice. There was no need to start this war in 2026, and right now the United States are in this trap, and the whole world has to pay for that. My second reason why I hate Brandon Herrera is because he has posted like 8 videos on his channel which were covering the war in Ukraine, but it had tons and tons of questionable comments.
They always said the next revolution wouldn't be televised. I'm beginning to think it's going to be live streamed. I've said it before and I'll say it again, we are literally living out the timeline that is Escape from Tarkov lore. Now I know we just did an emergency gun meme review about a, well, little known country called Ukraine.
Ukraine is basically the biggest country in Europe, and many believe it to be the country where the geographic center of Europe is located.
When Russia pops off World War III, but Putin puts in a surplus order for AK-50s. Well, unfortunately, because of sanctions that are already in place, that would be very illegal to be selling weapons to Russia. Also, entirely unrelated, Putin, check your WhatsApp.
Those videos made millions of views and made... Well, let's just assume that he would gain at least $700 per million views, and that's excluding all the sponsorships like the Sonoran Desert Institute, and he didn't really offer a shred of solidarity or provide any financial aid to Ukraine. In fact, in one of his most recent discussions with peers, because it's not exactly an interview, he said that he doesn't like when finances go towards this war in Ukraine.
I will say though, this is like that is the one argument I see, because I'm not a big fan of, especially financing this war.
I think that, like, and I'll put this out there as somebody from like an opposite perspective who doesn't like a lot of Ukraine funding and things like that. And like, yes, probably one of the best arguments I've ever heard in favor of that. It's like, okay, if we're spending so much on defense spending, it's to weaken our strategic enemies, and if we can do that without spending any American lives, like, I totally understand. And not
Yeah, I don't want anybody to suffer on either side, but if we could somehow test this military equipment and no American lives were lost, then it would be awesome, because only American lives matter.
while I don't agree with it necessarily to a degree of like, hey, let's not maybe spend $500 billion doing that.
Wait. 195 billion is not equal to 500 billion. And it's also important to consider that a significant amount of money also went to the US factories in over 70 US cities where workers were paid for producing military equipment that was later sent to Ukraine. So this means that these $195 billion are not necessarily pure cash. Like, I get it that the beginning of this war was like a gold mine for Western gun culture content makers, but I truly believe that this is some kind of parasitic behavior because you're just making profit for yourself without offering any support. I know he said that my thoughts are with Ukraine, but at the same time he said that he has friends in Russia, he has friends in Ukraine. All of them said that no one wants this to happen. And frankly, I think that your Russian friends, Brandon, are just pulling wool over your eyes, because if they didn't want this, then obviously the war wouldn't have continued for so long. If Russians didn't want this, then they wouldn't listen to Putin, who makes orders to torture POWs from the Azov battalion with extra violence, or any Ukrainian POWs for that matter. Here are photos of a Ukrainian soldier before and after 3 years of being tortured in Russian captivity. Before, I didn't really understand the meaning of the phrase, slaves don't go to heaven, but now it's all clear to me. Russians are just slaves who blindly follow the orders given by their Tsar without questioning their morality. If they didn't want all this bloodshed, then they wouldn't launch hundreds of drones and tens of missiles every single night on the Ukrainian territories. Well, I'll just make a small pause here. Just want to show you something. You see, this is a disinfectant, but as you can see, it's empty. But why do I keep this bottle of a disinfectant if it's still empty? It's because it says here that it's made in Bakhmut. And just for your information, this is a city that is completely leveled down at this point. There's no city remaining because it was destroyed by Russians. And Russians do not know how to create something. They can only destroy. The comments he made in his emergency gun meme review, man, is just so cringe, honestly. This is way too offensive. I understand what dark humor is, but seriously, I cannot laugh at this. This is just making fun of human tragedy, because people in Ukraine, civilians, servicemen, are dying every single day, and lots of people dying absolutely horrid, agonizing deaths. This is just so arrogant, and I don't find this funny. My biggest grudge and the obviously misconception that I want to clear is that Brendan Herrera said, "This is so sad that nations who used to be brothers are at war."
It's pretty terrible, especially between two nations that have so much in common and are literally family in a lot of cases. Ukraine continues and even asks for help from NATO. Russia dislikes this and remembers the good old days of when Ukraine and Russia were a couple.
Oh, God. This is a very dangerous mindset, like I said. Very superficial. This is incredibly minimizing and historically blind to consider this family feud. And just so you know, back when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, obviously Ukraine did not willingly join the Soviet Union. It was forced to, because we were invaded by the Bolsheviks. And the existence of Ukraine within the Soviet Union was one of the most tragic pages of our history. This is the time when Ukrainian language was the most oppressed. People weren't allowed to speak Ukrainian. They weren't allowed to write books in Ukrainian. Poets, writers, playwrights were prosecuted. Many of them were simply killed. You know, the World War II ended in 1945, but Vasil Stus, one of the most prominent authors of the 20th century, died from inhumane conditions for living in a concentration camp in 1985, 40 years after the end of World War II. Holodomor, which there were actually the Holodomor, which lasted from 1921 up to 1923, Holodomor, which dates from 1946 to 47, and the most destructive artificial famine during the Stalin's regime was the one that happened during 1931, 1932. Millions upon millions of people died from the famine that was artificially created. If you want to get at least a bit of an idea what happened during those years in Ukraine, you should watch a movie called Mr. Jones. I highly recommend you watch this movie because it perfectly conveys the tragedy that Ukraine went through at that time, because it was a literal genocide. One of the opportunities for Russia to colonize, because essentially this is colonization. Ukraine and later claimed that the Ukrainian territory is Russian land, and it has always been like that. During the Soviet Union, the Russian regime would deport the indigenous people of Crimea from their own land so that they would work in camps in Siberia, and tens of thousands of them would die from inhumane living conditions. There is also a period called the Red Renaissance, which culminated in 1937. Actually started way earlier, but in 1937, in the Sandermoch tract, were more than 1,000 prominent figures who were either born in Ukraine or lived in Ukraine and created there, were simply executed by Extraordinary Commission and NKVD degenerates. This explains why Ukraine did not leave that big of a legacy in different fields of knowledge during the 20th century, especially in literature, because all of these people were simply killed before they could bring more to this world. All that I have mentioned so far is just the tip of the iceberg, that is, atrocities that Russia has committed against Ukraine throughout its entire existence. And basically, throughout our entire history, Russia would always invade us, wage war, kill, and colonize us. Ukrainian people and their language were always oppressed. So this alone proves that Russia and Ukraine were never brothers or sisters. It's just a myth that is always being imposed on foreigners by the Russian propaganda. Sadly, it just so happens to work against those who do not really want to dig deeper. And Brandon Herrera is one of those people. So yeah, he profited from making these videos, but he didn't give anything in return. Unlike other content creators who make videos about the war in Ukraine, sharing relevant news, expressing their support. People like Civ Div, Preston Stewart, Colin Robertson. No, Brandon Herrera is not like that. He made money, but he didn't provide any financial aid for Ukraine, and neither did he show any true support, at least some form of verbal support, by saying that he stands with Ukraine, that he is truly against the atrocities that Russia commits every day. So why is that? And this is my third reason, him being neutral about this. In one of his videos, he said that let's not get into politics. We're just dudes who like guns. Let's view some photos of cool guns.
Before we get started, one thing I want to mention is that there will be no politics in this video to the best of my ability. I'm here to talk about guns. We like guns. Let's talk about the guns.
And, is this very cynical, considering that he is literally running for Congress, and being aware of the situation both inside and outside your country, providing financial support for your partners is literally the job of a congressman. Yet you say that you don't want to be involved in politics. Deciding to stay neutral at a time like this is still a political choice in and out of itself. And I can only assume why Brandon Herrera made that choice. Perhaps he was afraid of losing his Russian audience. I don't know. I may be wrong. But even if it is true, you'll keep your Russian subscribers, but you'll have to trade your dignity for that. So you still lose something. You know, it's kind of funny how he once said that he wants both Russians and Ukrainians to stay safe.
If anyone from Ukraine or Russia is watching this, I truly hope that you stay safe.
While the entire conflict takes place on the Ukrainian territory and Russian civilians didn't endure the same amount of suffering as Ukrainian ones did, not in the slightest. They didn't have to seek refuge. Their home was never destroyed. They didn't lose their entire family due to an airstrike. For most of them, it's just a war that they can watch on TV without being bothered that the same war will once be brought back home, their own home. So yeah, these were 3 reasons why I hate Brendan Herrera. You've probably guessed it, this video is not meant for Brendan Herrera's fans, but rather those people who are quietly uncomfortable seeing such kind of superficial commentary, but so far haven't found anyone who would express a different opinion and prove why it's so wrong. So there you go. I was very annoyed at what he did some while ago, and I didn't want to let this go unnoticed, so I'm glad that I finally managed to express myself. Obviously, I didn't make this video to start some kind of drama or get attention. I just wanted to raise awareness. So I hope this helps. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Slava Ukraini!